The 2014 tripartite election was disastrous for many women. Not many women made it when they contested at presidential level or parliamentary level, or indeed at the level of councillors. But one woman is of interest today. You probably have seen her stand in parliament making contributions, and she is Agnes Nyalonje, who contested for the position of MP in Mzimba North, and she contested against one strong candidate, Finance Minister Gudo Gondwe. Today, I talked to her to understand her journey so far, to also understand why she decided to run and what she would want to see in terms of politics in Malawi in general, and of course in her constituency, what would she want to see that didn't happen in the time of Gudo Gondwe. I am Teresa Demwekandanga, the host of Insight. So thank you so much, Honorable Nyalonje, for being with us today. Congratulations, by the way, even though it's coming 2 years after you won. But congratulations. I would want you to, first of all, talk about your journey to Parliament. How was it?
First of all, let me thank you for having me here. My journey to Parliament, in one sense, I could say it's been a long one, but in another sense, it's been a short one. A long one in the sense that everything that I have done in my life up to the point I decided to contest for Parliament was pointing towards a role such as this, because everything that I have done has involved people, has involved an interest in people, helping to develop people either individually or in groups, or even indeed nationally. So I would say my journey started, my very first job after graduating at Chancellor College was actually teaching in the English department at Chancellor College, University of Malawi. After I taught, during which time I also was sent for further studies. So I went as far as a master's degree, came back. In the same time, I got married.
Wow.
And my husband then was also teaching at Chancellor College. We both have a very strong interest in education and development, development broadly, but education, and for him, science as well. Following that, we then moved to Canada, where the early years I concentrated on raising a family, but at the same time doing a lot of volunteer work, because at that point, with the kids being young, my daughter, who is now 33, I did not go back to full-time work. However, I felt restless sitting at home. So what I tended to do was look for ways in which I could contribute to society, even in Canada. And interestingly enough, one thing I was doing at the time was functional illiteracy training, because even in Canada, there are people who are functionally illiterate. What does that mean? It means that although they can speak English as mother tongue speakers, they can't read. So take a woman, for example, very wealthy, has any number of posh cars, but can't get out of the immediate vicinity of a town because she can't read the signs of the roads and so on. So when she gets out, she gets lost, because the only way she can recognize where she is the familiar landmarks. Mm-hmm. So people like that would come to me and be taught reading and writing and so on. And that's how it was. So from Canada, we then moved to Scotland, where I began to work. I did various things, including being in charge of the Scottish Refugee Council, setting up also an organization that looked after the interests of women and children. So in the days before the term gender-based violence became currency, we used to, at that time, call it victim support, if you want. But what we were doing was preparing, creating spaces in society where women and children who were suffering violence in the home can escape to, so refugees and so on. So I was in charge of that. Myself and two other women, we set it up and we ran it, and sadly it's still working today, and it's a big organization. I'm saying sadly because one always hopes that violence against women will be a thing of the past. Right. However, in many societies it's not. So what we set up was actually a refuge for minority ethnic women living in Scotland. The reason
are you still involved?
Not directly, no. But my best friend, who was part of the team, is involved because she's still in Scotland. But it is still going strong, and last year my daughter brought me a badge of the organization in its current form. So that was looking after interests of women and children, and that was in the 80s, by the way. And then from there I became in charge of the Scottish Refugee Council. So from looking after the interests of women and children escaping violence in the home to looking after people escaping violence from their countries, in different countries around the world. And from there I joined Edinburgh City Council, looking at community services provision, and especially looking to see how can local people contribute to policy formulation and service provision in a manner that makes those services responsive. So I said before that my journey could be seen as a very short one, but it could also be seen as a very long one, because all those things I've said are about how are people doing and how can people be contributors to development if their own lives are in danger. So you look after the welfare of individuals, support the improvement, and then the individuals will themselves then contribute to development.
So I would say you're quite experienced in your area, and you were having probably a good life outside the country, and then you decided to serve Malawians in your current position as MP. How did that decision come about?
I think to get to that, after in Scotland, we moved to Switzerland, where I began to be involved much more, because along the way somewhere, I also went for postgraduate studies in human resource management. With that, what I'd wanted to do was not so much to be a human resource manager in a company, for example, such as Heinz Baked Beans or whatever, but rather to be able to understand and manage people better wherever I am. So the people management, specifically in workplaces, but broadly, wherever people are getting together to do a job, whatever the job may be, how can it be better managed by attending to the people issues? So what happened along the way, as I was doing that, I was involved with the Scottish, the Swiss Tropical Institute, which does a lot of work in different countries in Africa and elsewhere. Through that, I was involved with the health services, management of health services. As I was doing that, HIV and AIDS was taking hold here in Malawi. As it took hold, it also hit my family. And also at the same time, being outside, as a black woman, the world at that point looked at black people as the cause of HIV and AIDS, as being the source of the problem. So we had to find a way. So I was looking out to Africa, looking out to Malawi, at the same time looking to where I was living and seeing that we were being persecuted because we were believed to be responsible for HIV and AIDS. So I decided then to look at the whole area and say, what is happening here? What was happening was that instead of looking at the real causes of HIV and AIDS, people were finding it easy to find a scapegoat. And so that turned my life around, plus the fact that in my own family, it was having an effect. So I decided to turn my life around and began to be interested in HIV and AIDS. And 20 years later, I was working in the United Nations in Geneva in UNAIDS. And during the period that I worked on HIV and AIDS for more than 20 years, I was also one of the years in charge of UNAIDS here in Malawi. What I'm trying to show there is that the road to Malawi was always being prepared. Right. Because I was over there, but my interest was in Africa and in Malawi. And with HIV AIDS, it was particularly in Malawi. So wherever I went, working on HIV and AIDS, Malawi would always be my example. So I then, in terms of moving back to Malawi, yes, it was a good life. Materially, it was a very good life. But in many other ways, it wasn't a good life, because it can only be a good life if you and yours are living a good life. So for me, mine at that point was not just my biological family, but socially, my family, like Malawi. Malawi was on fire. HIV and AIDS was taking away so many people even now when I sit, I look at like the class of 79 that I graduated with. There's a lot of friends and colleagues that are not here. HIV/AIDS took a swathe. So I had to do something because I wasn't comfortable. And although I'd been doing it from Geneva and elsewhere, because for 2 years I also was posted in South Africa, working with the UN still, at that point with the International Labour Organization, because with the human resource management, I'm interested in labor issues. It became necessary for me to say, yes, I've worked on HIV and AIDS, I've worked on development issues, management of health, broad management of people at work in the health sector, but I now want to go and work much more closely on the ground. That's how I came.
Okay, so let's talk about politics. You decided to run against one strong candidate who has been a politician for quite some time now, Mr. Gudo Gondwe, who established himself. Malawians know him as one strong Minister of Finance. And you were like, I will challenge that particular person. Was it easy for you?
First, let me say this. When I set off to run for Parliament, my focus was not necessarily, I'll challenge Mr. Gudo Gondwe. My focus was, I'll set myself to get that job. I was measuring myself against the job. Incidentally, that's usually how I approach life. Because every person, because I wasn't the only one running, even at primary level, in my own party, there was at least 7 of us that competed. And the elections themselves, there was 7 of us. I was the only woman out of the 7 contesting. But the way I tend to look at life is competition is between you and what you have to offer against the job you have to do. Do you measure up to the job? So I took the approach that said to the people, here is what I have, here is who I am, and here is what I would like to do.
But when you looked at Mr. Gudo Gondwe, didn't it strike you somehow that I have such a strong challenger in him?
Of course it did, because he is very well respected, and not just at constituency level, but nationally and internationally. He has done a lot for Malawi. So yes, of course I thought about that. But as with any job, you look at that and you say, so how do I approach my effort to become an MP, given that I'm competing against one of the best known sons of Malawi?
So you were the only female candidate, you say?
Yes, there was 7 of us.
7 of you, and we were the only female candidates.
Yes.
Do you think that gave you an edge over your fellow contestants?
Yes and no. Yes, maybe because of the whole atmosphere where everybody was saying gender, even though in reality maybe the support was not that close and so on. But all the same, the environment, the 50-50 campaigns and so on, created an environment where more people were being alerted to the fact that, yes, we can have female leaders. And the fact that we had Joyce Banda as president at that time also helped, because she had already demonstrated that it is possible for a woman to be the first citizen of Malawi. So yes, in that sense it helped. But in another sense, I think there are some challenges when you run as a woman, because let's take, for example, on the campaign trail. In the north, as you well know, we are patrilineal. So when a woman gets married, you're considered to have left your home, your father's place, and you now belong to your husband's place. So for a person such as myself, married to a man from England, that means immediately I'm considered to not belong. And so that was the first challenge. How do I deal with the fact that, yes, I'm of that place, I'm of Madise and Mzimba North, and yet because of the patrilineal and the gender whatever, I'm considered to be an outsider. So I had to deal with that. And my fellow competitors obviously picked on that. But at the same time, the strangeness of politicking in Malawi is such that there were times when they would pick on that, but there were also times when they would say, so if you belong, if you want to be an MP, you can't say you belong here, you don't even have a house. So you see, it's like on the one hand, I'm being told I don't belong. On the other hand, I'm implicitly being told I belong, because if you're asking me to have a house, it means you're accepting that I belong,
right,
and so on. So as a woman, and that's something that women, whether you're married abroad or married here, as women, I think generally we find that a problem, the dispossession, the fact that we're not seen to belong to either the husband's side or the father's side. You go to the father's side, they say, but you don't belong anymore here. You go to your husband's side, and they'll say, and actually it is worse for women who married locally, because then they're told, no, you don't belong here, you're from over there. So, which means you can't win.
Yeah,
and
right.
That creates a major problem, because people identify with candidates that they feel are theirs. So in that sense, that was difficult. And then, of course, there's the usual bad-mouthing and so on. I mean, things that one wouldn't care to repeat in front of the camera and so on and so on. That kind of politics, which it's not just as a woman, though. I think me as a human being is not something that I would ever want to indulge in, because the first and foremost for me is respect for whoever else is running. As a human being, I hold respect for everybody, so I would not indulge in that, but there was plenty of that.
Did you ever get emotional along the road and break down sometimes and feel that this is not what I had thought it would be?
Not to get to the point where I'm saying this is not what I thought it would be. Breakdown, not quite. Frustrated, definitely. Annoyed, definitely. There were many moments when you felt like you wanted to charge at somebody because you think, no, this is not fair, this is not just, and so on. So maybe it's a difference in how, as individuals, we react to situations. Because I knew what I was looking for. I wanted to become an MP because I believe that with all the things I've done in my life, everything that I have been given, and all the experiences I have, I believe that there's something that I can offer to the country, something I can put at the disposal of people in Mzimba North and broadly people in Malawi, to work with others to develop Malawi. So with that focus and that belief, I didn't encounter anything that was so big that it shook that belief. So the first thing is to have that belief and to be convinced that you can contribute, and you need to work hard to create the platform, because nobody is going to give it to you. You have to create the platform. So yes, it was hard sometimes, and yes, like in a battle, you go, and some days you come back feeling a bit wounded, but you sit back, reflect, and go back.
So eventually you won. Now you are in Parliament, and should I say lucky enough or unfortunately, well, Mr. Good Ogondwe is also in the House, but now just as a cabinet minister. How is it? How are the dynamics? You on the other side, Mr. Good Ogondwe on the other side, both daughter and son of your constituency, Mzimba North, in the House. How is your working relationship, and how does it go? Is it a blessing or is it not?
It's definitely a blessing, because what I say to people is that there's probably nobody in Malawi that was born a politician. And you find that most people became politicians well into their mature years. We're human beings first. And on that level, I have a lot of respect for Mr. Good Ogondwe. Professionally, I have a lot of respect for him. There's a lot of noise at the moment going on about this and that, but what we're seeing in Malawi right now is not the product of just one person or just one action. Because to tell the truth, he has done a lot for Malawi. I have a lot of respect. That's the first thing. Secondly, it is a unique situation to be from a constituency where the Minister of Finance is in your constituency. That's a special blessing. And he is a man with deep understanding of development issues and so on. So yes, I get up to speak in Parliament. And yes, I do say things when I believe they're not right or they're not going right. I do say them, because for me, that is the essence of being a leader in Parliament. You've got to say it as it is, if only because once you say it as it is and you name the problem, you can then go to the next stage, which is looking for solutions. So I very rarely just point out what is wrong and leave it at that. I'll always point out what is wrong and suggest some solution. Because sometimes in how you analyze and typify a problem, you're also creating the possibility of a solution. So that is important. So how does it work in Parliament? I do go to him quite a lot for discussion when there's a specific thing to talk about. I do go to him because he's a wealth of knowledge and wisdom. And quite honestly, I feel very proud that we're both there, because what it shows is that it is possible to have such quality and such capacity. In terms of how he reacts to my being there, you may not pick up, but every now and then he will send a note and say, yes, that was very good, and so on. So for example, last budget, not the 2014-2015 budget, I like to advocate for education, the entire continuum of education, from early childhood all the way to tertiary and technical education, because I believe that Malawi's opportunity to develop lies in developing young people. I made a special appeal for early childhood development. When I finished that, he sent me a note, which was very interesting. Wow. A note which basically acknowledged that, yes, that was really spot on. And I will consider looking at that item because it was so convincing and so on. So on a level where it matters, we work together. And yes, Parliament for a lot of people is just about banter and political point scoring, but I consider it to be a bit more than that. Point scoring is important because Parliament is a theatre. You have to perform like you are on a stage. But when the stage is set and the drama has ended, something has to happen. Some change has to take place. So for me, it is a theatre with a purpose, right? Not just theatre for its own sake.
Right. Yeah. So you contested at a moment when we had Dr. Joyce Banda, quite a strong female candidate, and she was at that time enjoying power. It would have been to many people's expectation to see her win. Did you have that expectation as well, and did her loss come as a shock to you?
Yes, when you go into battle, when you go into a competition, you don't go in to lose. If that was the case, nobody would go into any competition. So yes, I expected to win, and I expected Joyce Banda to win, and I expected People's Party to win. That we didn't win as a party, that was a great disappointment. That Joyce Banda didn't win, that was a great disappointment. So that cannot be argued, because it would have been nice. However, it is as it is. And we have to carry on and pick up from where we are, and so on. So for me, what that means is that, in fact, actually, I have said to many friends and colleagues, even to family, that I count it as a blessing that I started my life in politics in opposition, because that has given me a chance to learn the job. And to see that even in opposition, there's a role to play.
But you were found there, I would say, by accident, right?
No, because as I said, when you go into competition, you go in to win. But you also are aware that you may not win, which means you may be, in this case, you may be in opposition. Of course, it would have been good to have won, but whenever I sit and reflect honestly to myself, I say, thank God I am where I am, because for democracy to develop, we need opposition. We need opposition that's doing the job of opposition, which is, in very simple terms, I like to put it to colleagues across the, across the aisle, that it's my job to make them look good. What do I mean by that? I mean that they have the prerogative to make policies and drive this country. as they're driving it, there will be times when they're taking maybe what might be seen from the perspective of the people that I represent as taking the wrong turn. It is my job to say, if you take this turn, you will still be with those people. They will be with you. And if you are with them and they are with you, they will be happy, you are happy. So it's my job to make sure that that happens, and that's how development happens. It's not always about saying, because you are leading the country and you've done something wrong, then that's it. No, it's about saying, what can I do to add value to what is happening? But of course, when it's completely wrong, and I believe deep down that's completely wrong, for whatever reason, usually I will have some evidence that shows me that no, it's wrong because it won't work. It's wrong because it's going to hurt some people. Because as long as a policy leads to hurting people on the ground, then I don't believe morally that it's correct. So in that case, I feel compelled to say it is not right.
Right. Looking at the future of women in politics in Malawi, in the 2014 election, well, many female candidates failed to make it. Presidency at the level of the MPs or at the level of the councillors. Women generally didn't do well. And I'm making a huge assumption here. There's not been any study per se to say that that was as an effect of gender. But would you say that women have a bright future in terms of making it to public offices?
I would say women have a future. Whether it's bright or not at this stage, I don't know, but women have a future. Just because we didn't make it in large numbers this last time is no reason to believe that we will not make it in large numbers in future, because it's up to us and what we do. Of course, it's harder for women than it is for men, because as well as all the other challenges that men face, we face extra challenges. We face challenges of, for example, access to resources, because campaigning is very expensive. So we need to address those challenges, and one of the best ways of addressing those challenges is involving those women that run and fail to get there, and those women that run and succeeded, involving them, because looking at the story through their eyes will tell us exactly what is a priority to deal with. For me personally, I believe that there are elements of change that need to happen for individuals, women as individuals, but there's also things that need to happen in the governance arena. For example, if we were to improve how Parliament operates, and we were to strengthen the ability of Parliament to really be a Parliament of the people, that would also improve the chances of women, because more people would understand what the job of an MP is. Because in casting the job of an MP as being the person who provides, for example, all the needs on somebody's household, whether it's assisting with funerals and so on, the things that we normally do as MPs, if we were to unpack that and make sure that people understand it better and remove an MP from the role of being the social worker, for example, being the bridge builder, and so on, to the role that the MP is really meant to play, I think that would begin to ease the pressures on women, in the sense that the role of benefactor, MP as a benefactor, would not be center stage. What does that mean in effect? It means that women would not have to have millions and millions of kwacha or things to give to people, because it is not the job of an MP to be Mother Christmas or Father Christmas, but it's a job of the MP to see that the laws that we pass are conducive to development. The policies that we pass are conducive to development. To see that as a country we have enough resources, or the resources that we have, we are allocating them intelligently in order to meet the needs of people. That's the job of the MP, and to see that what we allocate money to is indeed a priority. For example, at the moment, we talk a lot about the youth. They are our priority. But when you look at our budget, it speaks a different language and so on. That is the job of the MP, to make sure there's alignment between those things.
Right.
And instead of the MP being the person who provides for support to basic needs of everybody, which puts pressure on, do you have the kind of wealth that would take you through that? And when women look at that, they immediately say, oh no, I can't manage. But it's the wrong iteration of the job that they're reacting to. So we remove that, which means we have to look at the changes that are needed. And sadly, as a country, we're not moving as fast as we ought to, say, on the electoral reforms. One thing that's being talked about there.
But shouldn't women be driving that change as well?
Definitely, we should be driving that change. That's why I said women who contested and failed, women who contested and passed through should be at the heart of driving these changes, because if we change how an MP is viewed, and if we reposition the job of the MP to what it really ought to be, you'd find that it liberates a lot of women, and a lot of men for that matter.
Right.
And it liberates a lot of resources, because when you look at the amount of resources that collectively we put into handouts of whatever nature, you find that it's a huge amount of money, which if put to organized development, Malawi would be in a different place. So I think it would change how we do business in development and politics in Malawi.
So let's finish off going back to your constituency. When you ran, what is it that you wanted to achieve that Godongondwe didn't achieve in his time?
Development is incremental. I did not decide to contest because I thought Godongondwe didn't achieve this, therefore I wanted to run and achieve it instead. What I look at is whatever he did, that's a platform from which I'll start and go on. Whoever comes after me, hopefully will also do the same. It's incremental, because whatever he achieved, and he achieved a lot in the constituency, is what I'm building on. My aim when I decided to run was to work with 3 main constituents, meaning groups. First of all, women. Secondly, youth. Thirdly, farmers. Because I believe that if I sit and dialogue with women, I'll find out what is important in their lives, what they aspire for, and that will then become my agenda. And if I have the opportunity to be visiting women in different parts of the constituency, which is extensive, by the way, then I'm likely to learn the different needs, aspirations, and hopes and dreams of women in different areas. And those dreams don't remain static, they change. Today it will be this, but as women get closer to achieving their dream of today, dreams of tomorrow are coming on board, and then my agenda will change, equally with the youth. Youth of one part of the constituency may not dream the same things as another part, but at the same time there will be certain things that will be common to all youth and so on. So it is my hope that as we go along, I will have created enough of platforms on which to interact with these 3 groups in order to begin to address some of the challenges that they face. Of course, working as an MP is not a lonesome job. You don't do it alone. You work with systems, you work with others. It is my job to make sure that the service provision from government, especially local government, is responsive to the people of Mzimba North. And if you notice that in Parliament, I almost always try to place the needs of Mzimba North in front of whoever the duty bearer is, so that they can consider looking at the need, but also looking at opportunities, because it is not the case that a constituency such as Mzimba North will just have needs, demands, complaints. No, there's a lot of opportunities. So my feeling is that more and more we need to be building on those opportunities. Mzimba North has a huge youthful population, which is a big opportunity. At the same time, it's very rich agriculturally. That's a big opportunity. Whether we utilize these opportunities optimally, that's the question. But I consider that to be part of my job. So no, I didn't consider myself to be coming in order to fix what Godongondwe didn't do. but rather to build on what he did and hopefully leave things a little bit better, just as he left things a little bit better than when he went in. Yeah.
You represent one of the biggest constituencies in Malawi, and you have remarked elsewhere that it might be important for the Malawi Electoral Commission to kind of relook at the size of the constituencies, including yours, and probably maybe it might be necessary to redemarcate.
Yes, that is, we need to look at it this two ways. Either you acknowledge that the size, and in the case of Mzimba North terrain, because the terrain is so critical, when you have a mountainous terrain with lots of rivers, the job of creating roads takes on totally different proportions to when you have flat lying area, not many rivers and so on. The road becomes cheaper to build and so on. So it's not just about words. These are realities that we have to face. So it's either all these things are taken into account when resources are being allocated, or we look at splitting in such a way that you create manageable entities that can do justice to development, and that mean that the people of Mzimba North are getting a just share of the development resources, because you cannot say that, and population-wise as well, it's not the biggest in terms of population in the country. There are constituencies like say in Blantyre or even in Lilongwe that have much bigger populations. But in terms of population in the northern region, I believe Mzimba North has the largest population, and it is the largest. Do you know that it borders with 5 constituencies? We border with Nkatabe North, we border with Rumpi Central, with Rumpi West, Mzimba West, and Mzimba Northeast. It's a huge place.
It's quite
so my contention is either we look at redemarcation, or we look at how we allocate resources to take account of the factors that would allow equitable access to resources. Because to develop roads, we'll look at the issue of schools. You cannot have a small number of schools, because you have to have, the distances are just phenomenal between schools if you have too few. So as it stands, we have 62 primary schools and 12, soon to be 13 community-day secondary schools. And there's need for more, because the girls have to walk a very long way to go to school.
Right.
Access to hospitals is difficult. We have very few, and so on. That's partly because of the geographic factors. Right. So definitely, that's something I would want to, as leadership, to be looking at. Because if we want to serve people, we want to be able to say, yes, definitely, we've done the best possible in making sure that every Malawian has access to services.
My final question to you. What are your aspirations in the political field that you're currently in?
My aspiration, if I'm honest, is that if at the end of the 5 years I've contributed to change of how we do development in Malawi, first and foremost, depoliticization of development. Secondly, as a country, if we can at least try to prioritize things such as education, because in prioritizing education, we'll be focusing on the one thing that has real potential to take this country to another level. Because countries that progress based on one of the 3 things. Either they have a lot of capital and it propels them forward, either or they have a lot of land, or they have a lot of labor. We don't have capital of our own. We have minerals, yes, we could develop, but to develop those minerals, we need capital. It still comes back to the same thing. We have land, but increasingly that land is not enough to be the platform on which we build ourselves into perpetuity, into eternity. However, we have labor. a huge youthful population, which at the moment is underused. It's underused because a lot of the youth are not educated, a lot of the youth are poorly educated, and a lot of the youth are not employed and cannot be employed, because to be employed you need to offer something, you need to have some skills and so on. So if we were to do the same way as some of the countries in Asia, for example, have done, who realized quite early that their advantage lies in their people, if we were to really seriously say it and believe it and do something about it, then I believe Malawi would develop. And for me personally, if I can contribute to that change in mentality, to that change in focus, and to realizing, we complain about population increase. Yes, it's a problem, we have to work on it, yes. But while we have the large numbers of people, let's use them, because that's our wealth.
Right.
Yeah, in Tumbuka we have a saying, we say, usambazi wit, our wealth is in the people, the young people.
Honorable Nyaonje, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.